streamed like live to YouTube something from your account before? Is it like, is your account authorized? Maybe it's only
I
the
mean,
East Side's account.
I'm still on the, oh, hey, I think we're streaming. We're, we're streaming now. I don't know why we're streaming, but we are. And I was literally just typing into the chat like, sorry folks, can't figure it out.
Like live
We're
to YouTube something
we're
from your
live on
account
YouTube.
before? Is it like, is your account authorized? Maybe it's
So thanks for being patient, folks. I know that there's some people that dropped off, but I know that some of you were patiently waiting while I figured out these tech glitches. And frankly, I have no idea what happened, but we're here. Praise Jesus. So so this is the second conversation in a series of conversations that is going to be about copyright. And each of these conversations is not designed to like answer questions necessarily, but just share experiences and viewpoints because so many different people and entities are involved in the copyright process concerning congregational song that we thought it would be really useful to explore all those viewpoints and talk about some issues, talk about successes, things that are working well, but talk about some things that aren't working well, and then to dream about a better future. Now's a great time to dream because we're all stuck at home still anyways, or we're just starting to kind of get back in and see what the new situations are going to look like. And so this is a great time to dream about some things in the future that might get better. So with me, I've got 3 guests today, and then next week we'll have another conversation with the same type of group, and that is people who are leading every week in churches, who are handling in some way or involved in some way with copyright at their local congregation. So Ronnie, I'll ask you to introduce yourself first, and then Christopher and Kathleen, you guys can go after Ronnie in whichever order you like since you're in the same room. Ronnie?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ronnie Wilson. I am the Director of Worship and Arts at New Hope Baptist Church in Hampton, Virginia, where the pastor is Dr. Christopher Carter. That is where I serve on a weekly basis.
Good to have you, Ronnie.
Thanks.
Kathleen Thomerson, and I'm a member of the congregation here at the Episcopal Church of the Holy Spirit in Dripping Springs, Texas.
And I'm Chris Cadell. I'm the rector here at Holy Spirit in Dripping Springs, and it's a joy to be here.
Where is Dripping Springs exactly?
We are a suburb of Austin, Texas. So just about 25 minutes outside of downtown Austin on a very good traffic day. So,
which is at least 3 times a year in
Austin.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I met Ronnie when he was doing his master's degree at SMU because I had recently graduated, but I was still in town. So we have that SMU connection. Perkins School of Theology, shout out to. Oh, yes. So a lot of Texas connections in this conversation. So I'm gonna start by just asking each of you to share what it is that you do in your current situation. So, how are you involved with copyright? Are you the person that reports it? Do you just support the person that does that? Just kind of describe your situation. So, Chris and Kathleen, do you guys want to go first, and then Ronnie?
Go ahead.
Sure. So we're relatively new to, as a congregation, to the issues that surround copyright. There were occasional times for a funeral or something like that where we would purchase a license for something, but most of the time prior to pandemic, we generally sang out of the hymnal and didn't stream services. So copyright wasn't high on our priority list. Of course, then March of 2020 rolls around, everything goes online. One of the first things we start digging into is how do we do this and how do we do this legally? And so that led us to essentially, I deal with three things when it comes to congregational singing right now. I have a program that produces and has the images of our hymns available to us. So that's sort of a denominational thing, but it's called Write Series. So I'm able to pull those hymns out of the Write Series program to be able to both print in a bulletin as well as post online. Of course, that opens up the copyright conversation. So I'm dealing with one license. Who does we have a license with one license. And then, of course, the third piece of that is what you got to wrestle with here for a few minutes, Brian, is YouTube. And YouTube has their own copyright issues that I'm struggling with on a regular basis.
Yep.
To be fairly frank, we did what I just described to you for about a year. And as we are coming out of pandemic, we have decided that struggle was a lot, and we have we at Easter went back to our 2 service schedule. So we have an 8:30 service that's a non-musical service, and that is the one I'm currently streaming as opposed to the 10:30. And the biggest reason for that is the complications around copyright and time that it takes.
Yeah,
so,
right.
I'm in a small congregation with a small staff, and even as the lead pastor of the congregation, it generally falls on me to do that work. So
yeah,
that's a lot of time and time that honestly I need to spend in other ways. So that's where we're coming from.
I think your situation, well, it's certainly not unique. I mean, when you look at the demographics of the church in the U.S., it's pretty heavily split between giant churches with giant staffs and small churches with very small staffs and mostly solo pastors, or even pastors with multiple calls. And so, yeah, I think a lot of folks are probably resonating with what you just shared. And I do want to bookmark your comment about YouTube and copyright, which I have heard and experienced personally is really a separate issue outside of the one license CCLI kind of thing that you have to navigate. So I want to bookmark that and come back to that for sure. But I don't want to stop Kathleen. So,
Well, as I said, I'm retired, and I do have some things in copyright, and some people I deal with about that. But I was surprised when I counted up. I've been in the past copyright administrator for 5 different organizations: one Methodist church, one Episcopal church, one Missouri Synod Lutheran church, one traveling conference ministry that we did our own songbook and all that sort of thing.
cool.
And then when I was on the education committee of the American Guild of Organists, I was in charge of copyrights for a video series that we did.
Wow.
I did the first 3, and then it's continued on since I rotated off the committee. And I had a lot of interesting problems with dealing with that as being a little different than churches or conference ministries.
For sure. And Ronnie, what about you?
Yeah, so I don't have much background in copywriting, but at the appointment that I had before the New Hope appointment, I was at First United Methodist in Saxe, and we had 2 praise bands there, and they introduced me to the world of copywriting. In which I didn't really have to take on. I didn't have to spearhead. They helped me with that. But as you said, in the post-COVID world and in the streaming world, I too have done a little bit of copywriting work as well. The 2 sites that I usually use are the songselect.ccli to get licensing, and the one license, of course. I know I can hold those for at least, I guess, 1 year, I believe. To get the songs that I need to stream. Luckily, the songs that are playing when while the parishioners are walking in is all in-house music. So the stuff that we've already written, and we don't have to actually, copyright.
That's a good way to avoid copyright issues.
Yes. But when we go live and we start doing praise and worship, we are a hymn heavy church. So most of our songs are hymns, or just arrangements of hymns. But when we do praise and worship selections, of course, that is, contemporary gospel, contemporary Christian music. So that is where we need to get into the copyright business. I don't handle that directly. Luckily, someone in my media team is well versed in that. So I give the song and the person that wrote the song, and they go ahead and do that. But I want to learn more. So I'm going to use this as a learning tool to branch forth.
Well, I think in my experience so far with talking with people, local church musicians and pastors and stuff, Chris, you alluded to this. I think there are two main situations that people have found themselves in over the last year and a half because of the pandemic. The first one is you just used a hymnal, and you didn't have to have a license because you bought the hymnals and you sang out of the hymnals, and that was it, right? So I feel like a majority of Episcopal churches must have been in that situation because they rely very heavily on the hymnal 1982. I imagine a lot of Lutheran churches the same way with, they just tend to be very hymnal heavy. And so when you went digital, it was like, oh, wait, we can't just use the hymnal. And so you've kind of had to start from scratch on what do we do? Where do we turn to? How do we secure these licenses? What licenses do we secure? And I feel like the copyright companies were having to do a lot of just basic education.
Yes.
And local church musicians and pastors and staff were just like, who do we even ask about this? Because it's never, it's just wasn't on their radar. The other situation was people who were used to doing maybe like a lot of Roman Catholics do. They print their bulletins or something, and so they may have had that one license or ccli experience, or like Song Select where they print out songs or project on their screens, but they may not have been doing live streaming. So then all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're pretty sure we can just keep live streaming. And it's like, oh no, you can't. You have to have another license. And so it was like just a next level copyright, So I feel like those are the two main situations people have found themselves in. I wonder if any of you want to take a stab at why you think so many people found themselves ill prepared to handle this. Is it just a sucky reality that the pandemic kind of created, or do you think that there's just a lack of education from our institutions to teach pastors and musicians on when they go out into the real world? Here's some legal things you need to know.
I'll take a step first. Yeah, that I think the second thing you said, that just the lack of education upon it. In the background that I come from, of course, Pentecostal. This is a Baptist church, but they have Pentecostal ways. So I don't have to order sheet music. I very rarely do lyric sheets. Everybody learns everything by rote. The music down to musicians, each musician, bass, the drum, the organ, the keyboard, everybody is listening to it and they're playing it. So no one reads the music. On the other end, when I was at the First United Methodist Saxony, everyone needed music. Everyone needed the sheet. We don't care how contemporary or how traditional it was. We need sheet music. Like back and say at New Hope, the lack of education. We really didn't know that we have to have permission to sing this song the way we're singing it on live. And so when we're on live and they were live streaming on Facebook and they didn't have the caption, I don't own the rights to this music, and now your whole live is silent, and we don't know why. It's because we don't have the permission to sing this song, use this music, or we're portraying that this is our music, but we have to have those couple words. I do not own the rights to the music. So like you said, that lack of education on this is a thing, and people have to get paid for this. So I think that's where a lot of eyes are open, especially in the 757 area. A lot of churches here did not know that, but now we all do.
I was administrator I mean, all the churches that I was at had a license already, but we had hymnals and we had songbooks. And with COVID, all the hymnals went out of the pews, all the songbooks went away. You had to look at the screen, or you were home looking at the screen.
Right.
Yeah, I think I would echo, I can't speak for the Episcopal Church as a whole, but I think a vast majority of sort of Episcopal ethos is we're very comfortable in the way we've always done it, and so to have hymnals in the pews to be the main source of the music for the church. That's not every Episcopal church, but that's a vast majority of them. That's sort of the standard go-to. And like I was mentioning, sort of in the introduction, there were those occasional ones where you might want to sing a hymn that's not in the hymnal, and there were some pretty easy ways just to write off for the one-time use, and everybody felt good about that. But most of us weren't streaming before this, and so that added that whole new piece to it, and then for Holy Spirit, it was also the reprint license to be able to do that in bulletins and be able to post those on our website, so people that were at home could follow along. So it was a very quick crash course in a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of reading and different, do I need CCLI, or do I need one license, or do I need them both? There was a huge kind of crash course in that. So
well, let's talk about that for a second, because I did see a question on the YouTube stream here. Someone asked, how many churches have both a CCLI and a one license? And I would just be curious about your churches, Ronnie and Chris and Kathleen. Do you have both? Do you have one or the other? How did you determine that? Like, describe the process of figuring out which one you needed, or if you just got both, why?
Yeah. So
Ministry, in the conference ministry, we had CCLI because that was more the music that we sang, and we went to all different denominations. So we didn't work on hymnals. We had our own songbook. So the other places I was, two others I've been CCLI, and I myself started out with CCLI. And before that, we just wrote GIA when we wanted to do a Tizay service and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, CCLI is definitely an older company, and so if you've been in the business for a while dealing with copyright licenses, CCLI was definitely predates one license as far as I understand it. And then of course there was recently a merger where License Sing merged with one license, and there's been some movement over the last 10 or 20 years and new entities. And Ronnie, do you want to pop in, and then we'll go back to you, Chris, to describe your journey of figuring out the licenses?
Yeah. Funny, we have both on accident. Yeah.
Okay.
We have both. The pastor, he just wanted to cover everything. So I think I was looking for a song on Song Select, and I could not find it. So he's like, go to One Life, and and I think I found the song up there. So he got both just in case I could not find a song on one and the other. So that's why we have both right now. But when it expires, we'll just stick to probably one license.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
So our journey was based on just looking at both of those companies and seeing which one seemed to cover the music more. And I eventually ended up with one license because Church Publishing is who holds many of the copyrights to our hymns.
Right.
They were listed as one of the publishers that was covered by one license, and CCLI seemed to be more hit and miss whether or not they would have everything in our hymnal. So I ended up with one license. One of the interesting facets about that is that in the program that I use that reprints the bulletins, it is my understanding that the reprint license is part of the fee that I pay company that does does the program of the reprint, but they don't cover the streaming, right? So it's
Right.
this whole conglomeration. And then when I went to one license, I could add streaming, but I couldn't just get a streaming license from them. So it was, we are in some ways double paying for the printing portion of it. But that's how we ended up with one license. It was call based on who covered the hymnals that we would normally sing out of.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I don't know what your experience is, what y'all's experience has been, but just figuring out what's covered under the two, and there is a significant amount of overlap. When I kind of first started out, I kind of assumed that like one license kind of covered some stuff and CCLI kind of covered some stuff, and there wasn't very much overlap. But in reality, there's a lot of overlap in what they cover, but there are some significant differences that can highly affect certain people depending on the genres you're pulling from and publishers. I have found that to be very difficult to figure out. I don't know if y'all
I
struggled.
completely agree. Yeah, I mean it's been. I know we have some Episcopal churches that have gone away from or not gone away, but have broadened their musical repertoire and brought things like praise and worship music. And those churches I see more tending towards the CCLI license rather than the one license. But I don't, it is hard to figure out, even within the licensing, it's hard to figure out, is what I'm trying to do actually covered by the license that I have, right?
Right.
So
right.
That's been a huge thing.
The other thing that I've just a quick tip for all you out there that are watching this is of course, when I do copyright for the Hymn Society, because I although now Stephen's doing that, thank God, but I've done it over the last like 4 or 5 years. There's some weird, like at our conferences, some weird stuff gets used because our clinicians like to kind of showcase the new or, global, things from around the globe that you may never have heard of before. But then the copyrights get really crazy. What I've learned is that because the catalogs are so huge under CCLI and one license, I mean, it's next to impossible for them to really list everything, or to make it easily findable. So speaking to a representative can often be very helpful, or just emailing them, and they have mechanisms to say like, I'm reporting this even though I didn't find it. And then they'll report back to you and be like, yeah, we actually do. That's covered. Great. And then you don't have to do anything else. Or actually, no, we really don't cover this. And so then you can circle back around and kind of retroactively figure it out. But it's a job.
It is. It is. I mean, kind of anecdotally, Kathleen and I were talking beforehand. We had a one license that we couldn't. It was an anthem that was sung during communion, and looked for it on one license, could not find it. Did the self-report back to them.
Right.
About 6 weeks later, we got something back that says, "I'm sorry, we don't cover this," even though the publisher is one of their members.
Right. Just like one of those weird exceptions.
I guess so. I don't know I don't know why it was rejected, So,
right.
I mean, the workaround, it wasn't ever reprinted. The workaround was we just went into YouTube and muted it, and did not actually broadcast that piece of it.
Right. So let's talk. So I'm glad you brought up YouTube, because we dog-eared that, or I dog-eared that earlier when you mentioned it. You figure out you figure out that you need a license. You get the license. You report the music. You have the reprint and the streaming. You get all set up. You stream your service. And what has happened to literally, like, I feel like every church in the U.S. over the last year at some point, you get this little flag on YouTube, and it's like, you don't have permission to use this song. Have y'all all had this experience?
Yeah. We just started streaming to YouTube.
Okay.
And yes.
Immediately.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so what did you? Oh, go ahead, Kathleen.
Well, Chris has told me he couldn't use certain things because they weren't covered. And I said to him, it's public domain. What do you mean it's not covered? There's all sorts of public domain that they're rejecting, or there's descant. We don't need the descant. We don't use the descant, but it's rejected because somebody wrote a descant.
Right.
Wow.
So, and I've had the same experience where YouTube has blocked some of our videos when like we've sung, like me and one of the clinicians recorded, I don't know, some Fanny Crosby song, right? It's definitely in the public domain. And we used like Fanny's arrangement of it, and we created the recording, and it blocked it because it was like, this person claims a copyright on this and you can't. I'm like, so I just challenged it and wrote back like, you can't claim this, it's public domain, and I did this recording. So, basically like, go away. And eventually they get,
They
it
get
goes
resolved.
it gets resolved. But and it's, I guess I understand where it's coming from, that it's like they're being extra cautious not to break copyright. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't have time as a local church musician, pastor, as anyone working in the local church, you don't have time for that kind of stuff.
I mean, I got to the point to where I was trying to choose everything in public domain, because I can understand YouTube from a standpoint of they're not checking my license. They don't know, even though I posted in the description that all of this is being rebroadcast under my license number with one license.
Right.
I can understand like YouTube's not checking that. But when it comes to public domain stuff, that's, so I did step back and start trying to select mostly stuff that was public domain. And it didn't change the amount of flags that I was getting from YouTube. I would say on average, probably 1 out of every 3 services, at least one hymn was being flagged. And many of those were 18th century hymns or 17th century. And at some point it becomes this huge extra step that I need to spend the 30 or 45 minutes going through and disputing this copyright claim with YouTube. I've never had a single one of them come back and say, no, it actually is copyright. They've all come back. They've all come back and said either the 30 days has elapsed, or
right.
Or I actually had a few where the people who claimed copyright said, no, you're right, it's fine, and let it go. So, but mostly it's go in, dispute it, and then 30 days later it just is resolved and there's no issue. But it's time. It takes a lot of time to do that.
Exactly, and that's time away from ministry.
Yeah,
absolutely.
YouTube. Now, I mean, wouldn't it be great? I mean, because part of this is dreaming, right? So that's super frustrating. I'm sure a lot of you, I haven't checked the comments on YouTube in a while. I'm wondering if there's a ton of amens in there. Wouldn't it be awesome if there was some sort of way to enter in your license like ahead of time to YouTube, just to say like, hey, we bought a 1-year license. So for on this account, everything from these people who might potentially flag a song, we have a streaming license. I feel like that'd be a pretty legit way to like prevent a lot of these, and they've got to figure out a way to stop flagging public domain stuff. Right.
You would think so. And the thing that makes me even more curious is that, it'll tell you who the potential copyright holder is. And as Kathleen and I were getting ready for this, I looked up one that was flagged recently, and it was Jesus Christ is risen today, as a very, very much a public domain hymn. And it was ASCAP that actually, flagged that as the copyright holder. And I don't know how YouTube gets that information, but yeah, if I'm dreaming with you, I would love to be able to figure out how that YouTube wouldn't be doing so much of that while still protecting the actual copyrights, right? I mean, that's important, but it seems like out of an abundance of caution, or out of an abundance of trying to do the right thing, it just the pendulum has swung completely to the other side.
Right.
When you all finish with YouTube, I have a few comments about non-YouTube.
Well, so let me ask you this question, and then Kathleen, you can bring us in a new direction. After you get back to in-person worship, whenever that happens, or if it already has, and once things kind of settle down, what would you say the chances are that you'll continue streaming your services via YouTube or whatever streaming service you're using right now, Ronnie?
Important
100%.
for shut-ins and all kinds of people.
Ronnie, so you said 100%?
100%. Yeah. The pastor that I'm under, we have a new app, and the app is what made us go to YouTube. So via
Gotcha.
the app we're on live YouTube and Facebook at the same exact time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're reaching more people. So he really, really likes it. We're going to keep that. We have opened the church back to, of course, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe July 1, we can have everybody come back in the sanctuary. I think, well, that's what he just told me this week. It could be, that's what he told me. So that's what he's looking forward to that. So, but we will definitely keep the streaming. We've done away with the bulletins, and so that part, luckily they slid under the rug with that. So we've done away with the printing because we're printing the lyrics and things, but they did not know that was not okay. So, but now we of course, like now we know, and with the streaming we have the license and the reporting. I haven't started reporting yet. Like I said, somebody in my media team does that, but of course it's gonna come back to me. I have to have to learn about it, how to do that. So yeah, after post COVID, it's going to be 100% streaming.
Wow.
All services, as well as in person. So
Mm-hmm.
the concurrent method is going to keep going.
Chris, you said you've already stopped streaming your second service and you're only doing your morning prayer or your morning service.
Right. So part of it, we plan to continue. We made a pretty big investment in cameras and sound equipment to
I
be
feel
able
like
to
a
do
lot of
that.
people have, yeah.
Right. And so, and it has met a need, like Kathleen was saying. I think it's important for folks that are shut in, or we have members of our congregation who are, say we call them winter Texans, but they spend their winters in Texas and fly up, get out of here when it gets really hot and miserable in Texas. But so it keeps them connected. I actually this week had a conversation with a family who has moved to Dripping Springs since pandemic, and they did their church shopping online and found us that way. And their daughter is scheduled to be baptized in June, and so that's a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to your question, Brian, our plan is to continue to stream, but it's also partly because of music. I think we want to be able to provide people with something, but not necessarily the full experience of what they might experience if they walked into the door here on Sunday morning. To be real honest with you, sometimes it's just about getting some people out of bad habits of getting up and sitting on their couch and doing this rather than coming to church and being a part of the entire the entire experience. So but music was a huge part of that. Just the amount of work that I could see disappearing from my desk by saying we're only going to stream the said service. That was a real incentive not to do it.
So Kathleen, where do you want to bring us now?
Well, I just had, you said some frustrations or difficulties. So
yeah. So we can move into frustrations and difficulty. One of the questions that I posed them through an email just to prep us all was, what are some frustrations or difficulties you've had with this current system?
Pastors and choir directors to understand that I won't play music which they think is folk songs or spirituals or traditional, if in fact it's under copyright and it's not a folk song. It had a composer. They just don't look. And so one of the things that I want to record on this was something that everywhere I looked, it was called traditional.
Uh-huh.
And yet I kept looking, and sure enough, there's a composer, copyright 1948, A.B. Wyndham, published by the church. Let's see, it turned out to be a church in St. Louis, and I was in St. Louis at the time. Christ Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church, North Kings Highway. And I found the organist who'd been there from 1939 to 1996, and he gave me all the
God.
so that I can tell you that AB stands for Aaron Bash Wyndham. It's just amazing how many anthems are written on things that are really not traditional or unknown. And so I wanted to have it when we recorded it. I wanted to be able to give that information. Then other problems, what to do when you can't find heirs to copyright, but they may exist. That's a problem. I have a children's cantata I'd really like to publish, but my text writer is dead and I can't find out anything about relatives. And so I don't send it off anymore. And then lastly, how to handle copyright holders who will not reply to permission requests, which I run into several times. You always start asking permission early. You can't ask last minute. Of course, they're not going to get around to it. But in doing these videos, DVDs, in 2 cases, I had 6 months where I could not get the copyright holder to reply to give permission. And these were master classes and educational things. So in one case, I finally got through to a person, and she told me that, yeah, my request might be in this big stack on her desk, but she didn't have time to look at that. And she said, go ahead, but I can't give you permission. So I went ahead, and I never heard anything back. And then the other one, it was something by H.W. Gray, and not only being played, but I wanted to scroll the music underneath. Well, now H.W. Gray is held by a big corporation. Let's just put it that way. Well, the American Guild of Organists was small potatoes, but you're talking about something that was going to be sold to their members. It wasn't in bookstores, but you had to get the copyright permission, and they just wouldn't reply in any way. So finally, I asked a copyright attorney in St. Louis what to do. And she said, you got to write a good faith letter. You write a letter saying how many times you've asked and putting a deadline when you have to have a reply. If you don't hear anything back, and you say, if I don't have a reply by X date, I will assume that I have permission. And you send it off. And I did that, and I used it, and I never heard a word.
Well,
we didn't pay a fee.
If they don't have time to reply to the request, they probably don't have time to sue you either.
They're doing movie music and TV things and all. When you're small potatoes.
Well, I'd be interested in your take on this, Ronnie and Chris, because Kathleen, this is a very theological / ethical conundrum that we could find ourselves in as church musicians or people running conferences and things like that. I've been in this situation. We want to use a song, reach out to one license or CCli or whatever we have, and they're like, no, we don't cover this. All right, so you have to reach out directly. You're like, okay. So then you reach out directly to whoever it is, whether it's an artist or a smaller publisher that isn't represented in the one, and you just can't hear back. So if you don't have the wherewithal or the you don't know anyone to ask as far as like an attorney like Kathleen did, you're a go-getter, Kathleen. Then you're stuck in a situation where either you use the song that you feel like is the right fit for this ministry moment, right? You're doing the Lord's work, and like this seems like the right fit, but you could possibly be breaking the law, or you don't use it because you don't want to break the law, but you've done everything you can to get permission, but you just put it aside and then you change pieces. What are the ethics of this? That's what I want to know.
Chris, you can go first.
Oh, thanks, Ronnie. I appreciate that. I definitely believe that yeah, I believe in copyright because I think it creates space for the creativity to happen. If it doesn't, if it's not there and it's already pretty, I think, widely abused. But I think if it's not there, then it's theft. I really do. I think if you use something without permission, without some kind of if it's under copyright, I feel like that's taking something that is not yours and using it in a way that it wasn't intended. I think if I'm up in that scenario that you put in front of me, I think maybe what I might try to do is write off with a check, and say, here's $20 for using your hymn for this, funeral that I performed at Holy Spirit on this day with 100 people present, and hopefully, make a good faith effort to try to compensate that person,
Right.
if because I just don't think it's right to say, well, I never heard back or they'll never know, that kind of stuff. I don't think that's
Right.
I don't think that's the right way about it.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
And I even wonder, like, if you can't find the address for the person who holds the copyright, and they're really just MIA, like, just like cutting a check, donating to a local charity or
Right.
something, and saying, I couldn't find you, and so I gave your royalties to the
We host a group that does an orchestra here at a children's orchestra here at the church, and so yeah, I mean that'd be the perfect like nonprofit to say, we use this song, I can't find them, but here's a donation in their name for using their song on a particular thing. I think that's a great idea too.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. So we're coming, or unless unless you have anything to add to that ethical,
No, I
theological
agree.
question.
I agree. Yes, that ethically, yes. Do what Chris. Yes, that is absolutely.
I want to jump to our wrap up question. So the question is, if you could make one change to the current system to make it more helpful to you as a congregational leader, what would you change? And maybe we'll start with Kathleen and then jump to Ronnie and then finish with Chris. So Kathleen, can I put you on the spot?
I'd like to have plainer information about what music and what texts are in public domain. I'd like for there to be some central location where we can find that out, and in all countries. I know France, for example, it's different than our terms, and sometimes I have a lot of trouble if I want to make an arrangement of something. We need a central location for what's public domain, and then if it's not there that it's public domain, then that means, okay, you got to find out.
So essentially a clearinghouse that just has a giant index, like a searchable index of everything that's public domain in various countries. Nice. That'd be a good change.
That'd be an ideal change. That simplification. Oh yeah, where to find public domain and if it's not on public domain, where to find the artist that or a better way of contacting, like you said, to contact the artist or the person that holds the rights. That is very true about all different countries, because I do I tour with a choir, and when we go to Spain, the company that brings us over, for certain songs they have to change the name of the song in their bulletin for the audience based on copyright. So we're singing it, like for instance, we're singing a song by Ricky Diller called "Search Me, Lord." But in the bulletin that the concert goers have, it says, Lord. Now, the first line of the song is "You Know, Lord," but the title of the song is "Search Me, Lord." So, yeah, like she said, having that central location, cross country, where to find public domain, where we can find the artist, get a not maybe not a direct line straight to them, or just a quicker way of getting the access to the rights, access to the artist. So in this, the where we're moving in is changing really, really fast. So to get more a quicker turnaround for those last minute kind of things that we need that license now, or we're going to be, like he said, thieves. It's such a
Sorry about that, Rob.
I know that's in my mind now, but central
That's
location.
a very negative word.
But yeah, I agree 100%, Kathleen.
All right, Chris. One thing you would change.
I would echo both of those things. I think just the only thing I might add to that is to something that simplifies, and I know that's what CCLI and one license is supposed to be, but something that simplifies the way it's reported. For example, right before this, I pulled up Kathleen's hymn, "I Want to Walk as a Child of the Light," and in one license to see what that looked like. And it's a very popular hymn and has been, arranged by a number of different people. But when I pull it up there, it's very unclear to me, like, which one of these am I actually supposed to report if I sing this in my congregation on Sunday? I'm not sure why some hymnals list it by hymn number, but for some reason, the 1982 hymnal is not one that does that. And so you're trying to look at who are the contributors, who are who's the author, who's the copyright holder. And, from a layman's perspective, that's trying to do this, I would, make a choice, and sometimes it may be the right choice, and sometimes it might not be. And so I find that to be extremely cumbersome, even though it's supposed to be easier. So if I were king and could make a change, it would be as simple as being able to put in, I'm reporting from the 1982 hymnal, hymn 207, or 490, or whatever it is. Then it would, populate that is something that is covered or not.
Nice. I like that. You're talking about, is that the song you're talking about?
That's the one.
I love that song.
Yeah.
Could I say some good things about copyright?
Of course you can. We're not here just to crap on copyright. And just to be clear out there, these conversations are going to be from all different perspectives. So, the publishers are going to be represented in a conversation. One license in CCLI will be represented, because everyone's doing their best to navigate this thing. It's just really complicated. So I hope nothing has come off as critical of a particular entity necessarily. Everyone's doing their best. But it's just hard. So yes, Kathleen, please say some nice things.
I just wanted to verify, as long we can do anything we want with a copyrighted song, as long as it's oral tradition. We can't write it down. We can't give it to somebody with our changes. We can't change the words and sell it. But as long as we just sing it, we can do anything we please. It's in reproducing it and putting it online and giving it to our friend, the choir director at the next church, that we can't. So, and we can always change tempo. There's no tempo police. We can do it
There
fast,
should be.
faster or slower than the composer wants. That's fine. We mark changes in music we've purchased or instrumental parts. If we don't have tenors that can sing that high, or we don't have basses that can sing that low,
right?
We can changes. That's not against copyright. We can play it in any key. There's no transposition police. We can teach music with wrong notes, particularly people that don't read music. They'll teach it to their congregations differently and never know it. And that's okay, as long as they don't try to write it. Well, they won't write it with the wrong notes, maybe because they don't know that they're not doing what's written down there. But still, there's And I know there's one hymn, I won't say which, that we sing here, that by tradition, there's a big fermata put in at a place where I know the composer doesn't want it. It ruins the musical phrase, it ruins the text, but you can put fermatas in and you can do this, that, and the other, even with copyrighted printed music, it doesn't cover that. There's still a lot of individual freedom.
Mm-hmm. That's a good word, Kathleen. And I think that's a good way to end. I think I mean, we'll be back next week with a couple more. I'll be back next week with a couple more guests who are also local church musicians and pastors and administrators. So we'll continue this conversation for sure. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for what you do in ministry. Kathleen, thank you for reaching out to me in particular. I believe you emailed me about this and said, I have some things to say. I was like, all right. And so, what's that?
I said I had some things to report.
Okay, all right. So I out there, I hope you've felt you found some places to commiserate with your colleagues here. I hope you found a couple of helpful tips, and at least know that you're not alone, and that we're working on these things, and it's going to take a group effort to continue to educate each other on how we navigate all these things and support each other. So thank you for all that you do. If you're out there watching, thank you for your ministry, and we'll see you next time on our Copyright Conversations. Thanks, everybody.